State Farm just dropped a new commercial featuring Caitlyn Clark alongside NBA legend Chris Paul. And naturally, it's breaking the internet. The commercial itself is only about 30 seconds. But the reactions, those are lasting a lot longer. Meanwhile, news is breaking about the WNBA's CBA negotiations that proves the league has been playing games with those salary numbers. Let's get into all of it. Before we break this down, I gotta ask you this. Why do you think certain people can't stand watching Caitlyn Clark succeed both on and off the court? Is it jealousy? Is it something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Alright, so let's talk about what just happened, because Caitlyn Clark is once again out here living rent-free in people's heads. About 24 hours ago, State Farm dropped their newest commercial featuring Chris Paul. Now, Chris Paul has been doing State Farm commercials since 2008. That's almost 17 years of Jake from State Farm and Cliff Paul, his fictional twin brother. The man is basically synonymous with the brand at this point. But here's the thing. This commercial wasn't really about Chris Paul. It was about his retirement. The whole premise is that everyone's asking Chris Paul if he's retiring from basketball. He's 40 years old, signed a one-year $3.6 million deal with the Clippers over the summer, and yeah, people want to know if this is it. So in the commercial, the State Farm mascot Jake is trying to answer questions. Chris Paul's own kid asks if he's retiring. And then who shows up? Caitlyn Clark. Looking directly at Chris Paul, basically interrogating him about whether he's actually done. She's asking him point blank. Is it true? Are you retiring? You can tell me. The whole thing is actually pretty funny. Clark's got this playful energy where she's pressing him for information like they're old friends. And the internet? The internet went absolutely crazy. One person on X wrote, "Nobody understands how much I love Caitlyn Clark State Farm content." All caps. That's the level of excitement we're dealing with here. Another person posted, "New State Farm commercial with Caitlyn Clark cameo." By the way, nobody cares if Chris Paul retires. Many thought he did already. Okay, that's a little harsh on CP3, but you get the point. The star of this Chris Paul retirement commercial wasn't Chris Paul. It was Caitlyn Clark showing up for about 10 seconds. Now, let's put this in context because this isn't Caitlyn's first rodeo with State Farm. Not even close. She signed with State Farm back in October 2023, making her the first college athlete the company ever signed to their sports roster. Think about that for a second. State Farm had Patrick Mahomes, they had Chris Paul, they had major NFL and NBA stars, and they decided a college women's basketball player was worth adding to that list. Her first commercials dropped in November 2023. One featured her with reporter Jenny Taft in a coffee shop where someone says, "I need a break," and suddenly Caitlyn's doing a Big Ten game break. In another commercial, a couple says, "Shoot," after backing into a pole, and Caitlyn literally appears out of thin air ready to shoot a basketball. Then, earlier this year, State Farm launched what might be their best Caitlyn commercial yet. The From the Logo campaign. The whole thing is built around her signature move of hitting three-pointers from the logo at center court. In the commercial, Caitlyn says, "You know, life would be easier if I could do everything from the logo." Then Jake from State Farm literally paints the State Farm logo all around her house so she can open pickle jars and sort laundry while standing on it. It's actually pretty clever marketing. This commercial ran during the NBA playoffs and throughout the WNBA season. And now, with this Chris Paul retirement ad, State Farm is making it clear that Caitlyn Clark is a cornerstone of their marketing strategy. She's appearing alongside a 21-year NBA veteran who's been with the brand since 2008. That tells you everything you need to know about how valuable she is to them. But here's where it gets interesting. Because while Caitlyn's out here collecting these major endorsement deals and starring in commercials with NBA legends, there's a conversation happening about whether WNBA players are actually getting paid what they deserve. And that brings us to the CBA negotiations. As broke in the internet, I'm kind of missed reporting on it yesterday, so we're going to do a little catch-up time here, man. So what's that is the WNBA offered a $1.1 million max. Supermax is not what is saying sources tell front office sports. So from my understanding, I told her to immediately sign this. Now that's before I read this article. Now I read a little bit of it. I ain't gonna lie to you guys. We're gonna go over majority of it right here in this video. But supposedly there is like clause in this CBA negotiation. Basically, they have to meet meet certain criteria to make this $1.1 million. If you haven't been following this story, here's the quick version. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement with the Players' Union is about to expire. The original deadline was October 31st. They extended it to November 30th. That's 8 days from now. Earlier this week, news broke that the WNBA had offered players a new deal with a maximum salary of over $1.1 million. Headlines everywhere were talking about how WNBA players could finally become millionaires. How this was a transformational moment for the league. And look, I'll be honest with you. When I first saw that number, I thought the same thing everyone else did. Sign it. That's 4 times the current Supermax. That's a massive increase. What are they waiting for? But then the full details came out, and it turns out the WNBA was being a little creative with their math. According to Front Office Sports, multiple sources familiar with the negotiations said those numbers are misleading. Here's what's actually happening. The $1.1 million figure, that's not a base salary. That's a combination of the base salary plus potential revenue sharing plus bonuses. Under the league's actual offer, no player would sign a contract in 2026 with a base salary of $1.1 million. The real base Supermax, that's still between $800,000 and $850,000, which, okay, is still a huge jump from the current $249,000 Supermax. But it's not $1.1 million. So how do you get to that $1.1 million number they were advertising? Well, first you need your $800,000 to $850,000 base salary. Then you need to win an NBA championship. That's another $20,000. Championship runner-up? That's $7,000. Win the MVP? $15,000. Make the All-WNBA first team? $10,000. All-WNBA second team? $5,000. All-Star participant? $2,500. Want to know how many times they've been hit since the deal was signed? 0. Not once. The players aren't stupid. They see what's happening here. Sophie Cunningham, a veteran guard, told Front Office Sports, "It sounds good, and they can also have waved a big number in their face. But what happens when the business continues to go up?" The union's response to the league's offer was even more direct. They called it lipstick on a pig. Basically, the players want a system where their salaries are directly tied to a percentage of league revenue. That's how it works in the NBA, where players get roughly 50% of basketball-related income. In the WNBA, players reportedly only get about 9% of league revenue. 9%. While the league is experiencing record-breaking viewership and attendance, while expansion teams are selling for hundreds of millions of dollars, while sponsors are lining up to get their brands associated with players. Speaking of which, Caitlyn Clark is making less than $86,000 in base salary next season. She's the single biggest driver of interest in the WNBA in the league's history. She's selling out arenas. She's generating massive television ratings. She's got endorsement deals with Nike, State Farm, Gatorade, and a bunch of other major brands. And her WNBA salary is $86,000. Minnesota Lynx star Nafisa Collier has been vocal about this exact issue. She's pointed out that players like Caitlyn aren't able to earn what they're actually bringing into the league. Now here's the thing. The league keeps saying they want to increase player salaries. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has talked about transformational deals. But there's clearly a disagreement about what transformational actually means. The players want guaranteed percentages. The league wants to offer uncapped revenue sharing, which sounds great until you realize the caps are basically never triggered anyway. And meanwhile, there are other leagues popping up trying to capitalize on this situation. Unrivaled launched its first season earlier this year. That's the 3-on-3 league founded by Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. It ran from January to March and gave players another option for earning money in the off-season. Now there's Project B, which just announced it's planning to debut in November 2026. This one is wild. It's an international circuit across Europe and Asia, similar to how Formula One or LIV Golf operates. WNBPA President Nneka Ogwumike is one of the first public signees. So are Alyssa Thomas, Jonquel Jones, and Jewel Lloyd. The salaries in Project B are reportedly 7 figures. That's potentially more than what the WNBA is offering. So what happens if the WNBA can't get a deal done? Everything stops. The expansion drafts for Toronto and Portland can't happen. Free agency can't happen. The 2026 draft can't happen. Neither side wants a work stoppage. That would be terrible for everyone, especially with the league finally gaining mainstream momentum. But the players have made it clear they're not going to accept a deal that leaves them behind if the business keeps booming. And here's the irony of all this. Caitlyn Clark is out here starring in State Farm commercials. She's got an 8-year, $28 million deal with Nike, the most lucrative shoe deal in women's basketball history. She's got a signature shoe coming. She's making millions off the court. But her actual WNBA salary, that's pocket change compared to what she brings in. The haters love to point this out, by the way. They love to say that Caitlyn gets all this attention and all these endorsements, and it's not fair to other players. But here's what they don't understand. Caitlyn didn't create the system. She's just navigating it. If the WNBA paid players what they were worth based on the value they bring, Caitlyn would be making significantly more. So would A'ja Wilson. So would Breanna Stewart. So would a lot of players. The problem isn't that Caitlyn has endorsements. The problem is that the league's salary structure hasn't kept up with its growth. And speaking of haters, let's talk about them for a second. Lexi Hull, Caitlyn's teammate on The Fever, did an interview with Glamour magazine recently. She said the quiet part out loud. There is a level of jealousy when it comes to The Fever, just because of the media attention and the fans that have shown up for us ever since Caitlyn got here. She talked about hearing other teams and players talking in their locker rooms about The Fever. Every time they walk into a gym, there's a target on their backs. Every team wants to be the one to knock off the squad that turned the WNBA into must-watch television. And honestly, that tracks with everything we've seen. Think about how Caitlyn has been treated since she entered the spotlight. Cheryl Swoops tried to invalidate her scoring records with incorrect statements. Diana Taurasi warned her about how tough the WNBA would be. Breanna Stewart said she needed a championship to be considered an all-time great. Some of the biggest names in women's basketball couldn't just celebrate what she was doing for the sport. Meanwhile, Caitlyn has been nothing but respectful about the players who came before her. She constantly acknowledges the groundwork they laid. She never takes shots at other players. She just plays basketball and handles her business. The haters keep moving the goalposts. First it was, she can't do that in the WNBA. Then, when she won Rookie of the Year and broke records, it became something else. Now, every time she does something off the court, like appearing in a State Farm commercial, certain people can't handle it. One fan summed it up perfectly on social media. These WNBA fans are the most jealous, stupidest fans ever. Something like this has never been done in the NBA. Goes to show how good Caitlyn is because she lives in their heads. And look, I'm not saying every criticism of Caitlyn is invalid. No player is above criticism. But there's a difference between legitimate basketball analysis and people who just want to see her fail because they're uncomfortable with her success. The State Farm commercial is a perfect example. It's a harmless, funny 30-second ad about Chris Paul retiring. Caitlyn appears for maybe 10 seconds. And somehow that's enough to send people into a spiral. You know what's interesting? Some of the same people who hate on Caitlyn will turn around and complain that women's basketball doesn't get enough attention or endorsement money. But when a women's basketball player actually gets that attention, and those endorsements, suddenly it's a problem. Make it make sense. The reality is that Caitlyn Clark is doing exactly what she's supposed to do. She's playing great basketball. She's growing the game. She's capitalizing on her marketability. She's working with major brands who see value in associating with her. State Farm sees it. Nike sees it. Gatorade sees it. Every brand that signed her sees it. The WNBA should see it too. And they should be building a salary structure that reflects the value players like Caitlyn bring to the league. Because right now, you've got a situation where a player can generate hundreds of millions in value for the league and still make less than $100,000 in base salary. That's not sustainable. That's not fair. And the players know it. That's why the CBA negotiations are so tense. That's why the union isn't just accepting the first offer that sounds good on paper. They've been burned before with revenue-sharing targets that never get hit. They're not falling for it again. 8 days until the deadline. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, Caitlyn's out here living her best life, making commercials with NBA legends, growing her brand, and absolutely driving certain people crazy just by existing, rent-free, every single day. That's the situation right now. Caitlyn Clark is winning off the court while the WNBA tries to figure out how to fairly pay its players. The haters are still hating, the negotiations are still ongoing, and we'll keep covering every development as it happens.